Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. It's time, once again, for another depressing dose of dismal Disney. Disney's and Marvel Studios' latest MCU movie, The Marvels, opened in theaters on Thursday night for previews before Friday's main opening day, which was yesterday as of the time that I'm recording this video. And the movie's domestic box office earnings thus far are proving to be just as bad as I came to believe from the lowered predictions that Box Office Pro published on November 8th. On Thursday evening, the movie's domestic earnings were only $6.6 million. To understand just how bad that is, 2019's Captain Marvel earned $20.7 million on its opening Thursday night. So the $6.6 million that the Marvels earned on Thursday was only 31.9% of what its direct predecessor within the MCU earned. The Thursday night domestic previews for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 back on May 4th and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania on February 16th were the same at $17.5 million each. So the $6.6 million that the Marvels earned is only 37.7% of those. And the movie's Friday domestic box office numbers aren't any better. The Marvels' Friday domestic opening weekend box office, which includes the $6.6 million that it earned during the Thursday night previews, was only $21.5 million. 2019's Captain Marvel earned $61.7 million domestically for its Friday premiere, meaning that the Marvel's $21.5 million is only 34.8% of that. For Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, their respective domestic Friday opening weekend box office numbers were $48.1 million and $46.4 million. So the Marvel's domestic Friday box office revenue was only 44.7% and 46.3% respectively of what those two movies earned domestically during their Friday premieres. Now, for each of these three movies, 2019's Captain Marvel, 2023's Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and 2023's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the money that each of them earned domestically during their respective Friday premieres were their highest grossing respective dates in the US. Thus, their respective domestic Saturday earnings the next day were less than their Friday earnings, and their respective Sunday earnings were less than their Saturday earnings. So I don't expect the Marvels to be any different. And since I'm recording this video on Saturday, November 11th, I'll use the daily drops from those three movies to see where the domestic opening weekend box office for the Marvels could end up. So this next chart shows what the daily domestic box office earnings for the Marvels might be if it tracks with one of those three movies. But we'll go to this third chart to see what the sums of those three projections are. If the movie were to track the same as 2019's Captain Marvel, it could possibly reach around $53.5 million based on its Friday earnings. If it were to track the same as Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, then its domestic opening weekend box office might be slightly lower at around $52.9 million. But if it were to track the same as Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania during its opening weekend, then the Marvels may only earn around $49.1 million, which sits at the upper end of the predicted domestic opening weekend box office range for the movie that Box Office Pro released on November 8th. And which I had used in my latest projections for the movie that I had released in my previous video on Thursday the 9th. Personally, I don't believe that the Marvels will track as well as Captain Marvel or Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. It may track closer to Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania this weekend, but I am more inclined to believe that its numbers will probably be worse than those, so that it won't even reach $49 million for its domestic opening weekend box office. Thus, as I said in my previous video, The Marvels is definitely headed towards having the lowest domestic opening weekend box office for the entire MCU franchise's 33 movies, because the current record holder, 2008's The Incredible Hulk, had a domestic opening weekend box office of $55.4 million. And it truly doesn't look like the Marvels will reach that number this weekend. Now, internationally, the only data that is currently being reported is for the nation of Finland, where the movie has earned around $56,600, which is practically nothing. So I can't say anything yet definitively about the movie's international box office, but more earnings from more nations outside of the US should be reported tomorrow to give us an idea of where the movie's domestic share may be heading. So even though statistically this movie should have a domestic share between 34.44% to 48.42%, which are both one standard deviation away from the franchise average of 41.43%, I don't rule out the possibility that the Marvels could potentially end up with a domestic share that's greater than 48.42% and quite possibly over 50%. So we'll have to wait and see where the domestic and international opening weekend box office numbers for the Marvels ends up. Either way, this movie is going to be a massive flop. Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.